full of dirt, sliding in. Like, the best games for me was when I had dirt head to toe. Like, I loved it. I loved the grime, the filth, like hanging out with other baseball teammates, all the ridiculous chatter that baseball teammates, like, you ever hear what they chatter? Like, it's pretty ridiculous. Hey, batter, swing, batter. Hey, you got this. Come on, bro, you got it. Come on, let's go. Like, they say absolutely ridiculous things, and I loved it. I loved it as a kid. Every time I'd pull on those baseball socks and just the whole outfit, like, man, it was like game time, jump into the zone, so much fun. And I loved it, I think, primarily because in Little League, I had an incredible coach who knew how to drive us hard in practices but celebrate big in games. And we learned to love the game. And in that, like, we developed a culture and a camaraderie with my teammates that not only helped us enjoy the game, but really created a sense of, like, belonging and family. And when you had that belonging in that family, like, the love for the game just went through the roof. And when the love for the game went through the roof and you had that support system, like, my play was amazing. Now, like, when I was a 12-year-old at the height of Little League baseball, I can't remember how many strikeouts I had, but, like, I was, like, recording how many strikeouts I had, and I knew my batting average and how many home runs I hit. Like, kids were afraid to face me when I pitched. And it was mostly because I hit them. So I'd average like 2 or 3 hit batters a game. It was pretty scary. But anyway, I loved it because of my team. Now, the crazy thing is I wanted to develop the skill. I wanted to see how far I could take this. And so I decided after that to go try out for a travel team. Early high school, I was able to get onto a travel team, and they got me on, but I was in for a bit of a shock. Because these kids were not into developing a team. They all thought that they were going to be the next Babe Ruth, and their dads and moms kind of reinforced that. And so there was a very selfish culture on the team. It was very me only, and whoever played well was going to be the ones that got the recognition. It was a horrible culture. And I remember, for me jumping onto the team and feeling the diversion of values and kind of measuring each other all the time, it started to wear on me. And because it wore on me and the values that they had that were so different from mine, like, I just learned how to be quiet. And the more quiet I got, the more isolated I got. The more isolated I got, the more rejected I was. And the more I was rejected, the worse I played. No joke. I mean, I was a good baseball player, but I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn on that team. As a catcher, I had a hard time throwing back to the pitcher. Like, my confidence was in the tank because there was no camaraderie on the team. There was no sense of family. And in the middle of all that, I was so tempted to just completely hang up my cleats. I don't know if you've been there in life before, but rejection can do that to you. You get enough rejection, whether it's from family or in the workplace or some sort of a hobby that you want to get into or even friendships around you, and you don't want to go there again. Maybe there's some of you who felt that way in church, and to even show up at a church on a Sunday morning like this, like, it takes some courage because you felt that rejection. That's not easy to handle, and everything inside of you just wants to quit when you get that experience. I think the fear of rejection is actually a really loud voice in our culture right now. You've heard the phrase cancel culture, and I think in that it makes us very gun-shy to stick to our values, even if they diverge from other people, because we don't want to get rejected, we don't want to get canceled. And so a lot of us, what we do is we tend to kind of shut down or just kind of blend in, not say a whole lot, because if we rock the boat, man, we could get rejected. Can I tell you, as followers of Jesus in New Hampshire, the threat may be even more real. Because I think mainstream culture right now would love to silence more of the Christian voice and Christian values. More and more, we're getting marginalized in media and TV and news outlets and pictured really as kind of narrow-minded, unintelligent, morally bigoted, all that. And so it is easy for us to feel a bit of that canceling, a bit of that rejection, and if we're not careful, it can shut us down. We'll just stay quiet. Don't rock the boat, right? I don't want that to affect my job. I don't want to affect that in my neighborhood or maybe my comfort zone. And so best to kind of stay low. But what are we missing? I was tempted to hang up my cleats, and I think for some of us, we're tempted to hang up our influence as believers, our service, our impact in the community because we're afraid of getting rejected. Well, there was another church who faced this kind of temptation, this kind of threat to their life. We're going to read about them today. In Revelation chapter 3, we're going to read about Jesus' letter to the church in Philadelphia. And they had a pretty unique set of circumstances where rejection was a very real part of their life. And I'm going to explain why in just a second. But in this, what we find is a couple of threats to our belonging in our family and to our perseverance that they faced and we face. And I want to talk about the resources that Jesus gives us to help us endure. And not just endure, but make a lasting difference. So we're going to be in Revelation 3, starting in verse 7. Jesus said this to the church in Philadelphia. To the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, these are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. I know your deeds, Jesus says. See, I've placed before you an open door that no one can shut. I know that you have little strength, yet you've kept my word and have not denied my name. I'm going to make those who are of the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews, though they are not, but are liars, I will make them come and fall down at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you. Since you've kept my command to endure patiently, I will also keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. Now, Revelation has some bold language. In every single one of the letters that we read through, it's almost difficult for us to read through them because the language is so bold. But I want to explain to you what this church was going through. Jesus is talking about open doors and not having shut doors and some of the barriers that they had. He mentions even synagogue and saying, what in the world is he getting at? Well, the church in Philadelphia was originally connected to a local Jewish synagogue. They were most likely a high concentration of Jews in the city of Philadelphia. And because of their faith in Jesus Christ, they got kicked out. Every single commentator that's looking at this really agrees across the board. They must have been expelled from the local synagogue because of their faith in Jesus Christ. Now, why would that be the case? Well, Jesus was Jewish. His earliest followers were Jewish. It spread all over the place with a number of Jews around the Mediterranean world. But this was one of the threats. In the Roman Empire, Jews were afforded a level of peace from the Roman Empire to go worship their God however they want because they didn't see the Jews as a threat to the empire. But when Christianity hit the scene and it started extending beyond the Jewish culture and inviting all sorts of other people to come into this and it started spreading like crazy, all of a sudden it was a threat. And when the Jewish leaders of the synagogue started seeing these people following Jesus, they started seeing this is going to threaten our way of life with Rome. Rome might not give us this kind of peace anymore, and so we got to kick these guys out. And now all of a sudden, family members, cousins, co-workers, friends, they're expelled from the synagogue because they've placed their faith in Jesus Christ. They're abandoned, rejected, outcasts, and they're weak. And in the middle of all this, Jesus looks at them and says, I see you. I hold the keys, by the way, to a different synagogue, an eternal belonging of people. I've got you. If you will remain faithful to me, I'll see you through this. And so I think the first thing that we find when it comes to building a resilience, even in the middle of abandonment and rejection, is this. We have to resist the urge to find validation from the crowd. Resist the urge to find validation from the crowd. So many of us, when we do our normal day-to-day life, we want to be validated. We want to receive encouragement. We want to belong with the people around us. And if we're not careful, we'll do whatever it takes to get that kind of affirmation, that kind of approval from the people around us. You might not think that you're that needy for the approval of other people, but can I remind you, man, we are social beings that were made not to thrive in isolation, but to thrive in belonging. I had to quote the great theologian Michael Scott on this one from the great letter to the church in The Office. Michael Scott, at one point being interviewed, says, do I need to be liked? Absolutely not. I like to be liked. I enjoy being liked. I have to be liked. But it's not like this compulsive need to be liked, like my need to be praised. I love that. It's like so honest, right? So many of us, like in our normal day life, like that's where we're at. We crave that affirmation. And when someone praises you for what you do in the job or what you do in the home or as a dad or whatever you're doing, like it feeds you, right? It fuels you. And if we're not careful, we'll go to anything to get that kind of feedback loop because it keeps us going. But there's so many sources to find that validation that overpromise and underdeliver. I'm going to mention social media at this point, not because everyone here or watching online is always on social media, but I think social media reveals a bit of a culture that we have in America, whether you're on it or not. Social media promises belonging. If you post the right pictures and you say just the right stuff, you're going to get the response from other people. And you didn't even know you wanted an encouraging response from someone you didn't even know until they started liking what you posted. And then all of a sudden, whoop, the dopamine hits in and you're just like, oh my gosh, this person I didn't even know likes me. Cool, I'm going to do it again, right? That's how it works. I read an article, a New York Times article that said this person, as they got into social media, they reflected their experience this way. She's like, now I'm told every day, sometimes by the minute, that someone's following me. And that's supposed to be good news. Person you've never heard of is following you. Facebook announces with a ping. Guy you went out with just once 10 years ago is following you, Twitter says. You have 15,000 followers, and this, we are meant to understand, is a favorable and flattering thing. See, social networks have kind of cracked a code into the human dilemma that says that we ought to belong and we need to crave the things around us to find that sense of validation and belonging. And that feedback loop actually kicks in a sense of dopamine. And when we get that dopamine, it starts building into us a desire to do it again. They know that. It's the whole business model, because if they have your attention, they have your money. That's how the whole thing is built. And the crazy thing is, a post that was just an innocent post, for some now turns into an addiction where you have to be liked. The wild thing about it is, the crowd can crown you in one moment, but they'll also disown you in the next. Athletes know that all too well. You're a hero in one moment in the limelight when you score that touchdown, but man, when you miss the pass or threw a pick six, you're now the enemy. We have to resist the urge to find validation from the crowd. And this is what the church in Philadelphia was tempted by. Do you know that this is one of the only letters that Jesus writes in Revelation to churches without an indictment against them? Like, this is one of the few letters in the letters to Revelation where he offers only encouragement. But in that encouragement, he recognizes a very real threat. They had been rejected, they'd been expelled, and something deep within the human part of who they are is craving that and missing that, and they're liable to turning to things that are not going to be life-giving. Some of the worst lies are wrapped in beautiful packaging, and they promise that if we follow them down that road, we're going to get the validation that we crave. 2 Corinthians 11:14-15 puts it this way. It says, no wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So it is no surprise if his servants also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness. But he says their end will correspond to their deeds. There's some things that overpromise and underdeliver. The enemy is no fool. He knows how to get a hold of your attention and hold it as if that's going to be life-giving. But in the end, we have to realize the only validation that is going to fuel you and keep you fueled is clinging to the one who made you and died for you and has a place for you for all eternity. It's time to play for an audience of one. They were tempted by this synagogue of Satan, going back to a place that had been a positive feedback loop of encouragement. And Jesus says, hold strong. Keep clinging to me. I think in America we have a very real temptation for those of us who cling to the Bible and the Word of God and the values of Jesus. We have the same temptation to start caving on some of these values just to receive positive feedback from the community around us. In the marginalization that we are experiencing right now, again, we're painted as naive, unintelligent, bigoted, narrow-minded, even backwater, right? When you think about evangelical Christians, the idea is like you got a Harvard scientist on one side of the debate and this like backwater, Kentucky, unintelligent guy who kind of makes moonshine in his backyard on the other side. Like that's how Christians are painted. And I think for a lot of us, we're like, man, if that's the battle here, I don't want to be that. If that's how my neighbors see me, if that's how my coworkers see me, well, I'm just going to keep quiet. I'm just going to kind of blend into the background and not do anything, right? Nobody wants to be seen as that. This is the real threat for the church in Philadelphia. And can I say as a whole, collective church, there are churches out there that have given into some of the secular causes around them just to fit in and get more people in their church. There are churches that have become highly entertaining just to be able to feed the consumer culture in the world around them. Other churches that become nationalistic because they know if they embrace one political party or another, they're going to get more people in their church. And I'm telling you, it's caving every single time. Jesus says, stop looking for the approval and the praise from people or from the crowd. One, because they're fickle and they'll turn on you in the next second. But second, it's never going to satisfy you. Hold tight, Jesus says. He says, since you have kept my command to endure patiently, I will keep you. I will keep you. Some of you know family members that were tight in one moment and have turned on you because you said the wrong thing in COVID. Even family members, our own blood. Jesus said, I'll keep you. I'm there for you. And he says, I'm going to keep you from the hour of trial that's going to come on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the world. We have to be resilient in our resistance, our refusal to give ourselves to the praise of the crowd, even if it comes with rejection and suffering. Now, this is hard. Like some have tried to wrestle with, what does it mean that Jesus is going to keep us from the hour of trial in this letter? Does that mean that, the end times are going to come and we're just going to be saved from some of the suffering and the trials that are going to happen because we believe in Jesus? He's going to protect us from all suffering and from all harm. Is that what's going on? I mean, to get that from this text is actually to read a lot into it that's not there. But what we know throughout the rest of Scripture is that Jesus never promises us a life of comfort and peace, or a peace from all suffering or all rejection. In fact, he says, if they persecuted me, they're going to persecute you as well. Expect it. It's not going to be easy. There are going to be people who reject you because of your faith. We actually baptized a guy one time here at our church who grew up in a culture where to believe in Jesus Christ would almost certainly mean that you get rejected by other people. I remember that, walking him through months of building a relationship with him and leading him to Jesus to the point where he found Jesus as the ultimate in his life, believed that he was the Son of God, and actually died for him and built a relationship with him. And we were wrestling at one point over coffee, and I asked him, I was like, are you ready to get baptized? And he goes, I don't know about that. Because I know what you do in baptism. You get this whole tank and you film it and you put it all over online and everything. If my family hears that I have committed my life to Jesus, they will reject me. And I looked at him across the table. I said, is Jesus worth that to you? Tears started coming down his face. He said, yes, he is. We baptized him a couple weeks later. Jesus doesn't promise this is going to get easy, but he promises to keep us. And not just keep us as if we're not going to experience anything bad in this world, but to keep us from our soul going sour and south. He said, I'm going to hold you fast on the inside. I'm going to satisfy you like nobody else if you'll just cling to me. In John 17:15, it says, my prayer is not that you take them out of the world, as he's praying to God. I'm not praying that you remove them from the trials or the hard things. He says, but I'm going to pray that you protect them from the evil one. Our greatest threat is not pain or suffering. Our greatest threat is a soul that wanders away from God. That's what Jesus is going to protect us from. The amazing thing is that if we actually cling to Jesus, not only is he going to keep us, he's going to grow us. It's going to be a resilience and a strength on the inside of our soul that nothing can take away from you. I saw this the other day. I mean, so Romans 5 says, it's not even on my notes, but Romans 5, Paul actually says we rejoice in our sufferings and hard times because we know that it does something. That sufferings actually produces perseverance, and perseverance, character, and character, hope. And he says, and hope doesn't disappoint us. That in the middle of that trial, when we cling to God and we go to him, he will expand our souls on the inside and make us a stronger kind of a people in our character and our perseverance and actually build a sense of hope on the inside of us. I saw this the other day with a dear friend of mine. He'd been trying to repair some of the broken bridges that had happened in his family years ago, and there was this birthday party for his nephew. He was so hoping to be a part of this, but then a family member contacted him and said, "You're not welcome." They rejected him in that moment, not because of anything that he did currently or even did in the past, but because someone else who was invited to the party didn't like him and had a whole bunch of grudges against him. It hurt him deeply. But as he's expressing all of this situation to me, he said, "I'm not going to give up. I love my family. And I know it's been hard. And I know I want to be at that party and I want to be connected to all of them, but I will not stop loving. I believe that God can still open a door for me to be a part of that family." I saw that. Suffering produced perseverance. He's not going to quit. Perseverance produces character. The guy is filled with love. And on the inside, when character gets developed, it brings hope. He still believes. Do you know that's what Jesus wants to do on the inside of you? When you're rejected and abandoned by anybody, Jesus can still do something greater on the inside of you. I think in this, we have to realize that when we are rejected, when we are abandoned, it puts us in a place where we're very vulnerable. And when we get vulnerable, really, we have two different options in front of us. When you're vulnerable and weak, you can turn to all sorts of things that overpromise and underdeliver to kind of numb out and escape. Or you can turn to Jesus. And I think this is the second thing we have to understand when we look at this text. We have to see our weakness as an opportunity to develop our dependence on God. It's an opportunity. Jesus says, "I know that you got little strength." He recognizes that in this situation, when the church in Philadelphia is rejected, they're vulnerable, they're weak. They were likely a small church with little impact in the community, not because they weren't trying, but because they were just small. Jesus says, "I know you're weak right now. I know you're vulnerable right now. Hold tight. I got you." Anybody else, when you got a bad day, coming home at the end of work, like your first temptation is not necessarily go to the Bible or prayer? I had a season in my life where when we were starting to get this church going, and it was just challenging, really, really difficult, and a couple people walked away and kind of rejected us and abandoned us. Like, my temptation was to go to The Office, hence the Michael Scott quote. I'm well-versed in The Office. And I tell you what, it was a good couple of laughs, like every single night. You know, we'd go to it and we'd tune in, and it would one show turn into two into three, and like we just couldn't get enough, I think, because there was something on the inside of us that felt vulnerable and felt weak. And can I tell you, it didn't do a whole lot for our soul. Sure, it was like a little escape, and I'm not saying that it's never good to watch that, but when it becomes your default setting at the end of the day, when you get out of a hard work day and your default setting is click and just numb out, it kind of sucks your soul. That numbing and escapist behavior actually doesn't make us better. It doesn't take us out of the pain. It actually reduces our soul and makes us small. Again, the show itself is not wrong, but your default setting shows what you're depending on and actually starts shaping who you are. This default setting actually is what the Bible refers to as idolatry at times. And in Psalm 115, 4-8, it tells us that when we turn to these things as a way to rescue us out of the pain and the vulnerability that we find ourselves in at times, it starts not only grabbing our whole attention, but actually starts shaping us into what those things are. Psalm 115 says, "Their idols are silver and gold made by human hands. They have mouths but can't speak, eyes but can't see, ears but can't hear, noses but can't smell. They have hands but can't feel, feet but can't walk, nor can they utter a sound with their throats." In other words, these are just things that have no substance behind them. They're talking about carved images or, little things that they would call idols. We don't have images in our home that we bow down to. We have TVs. We've got all sorts of consumer goods. We've got the praise in the infinity scroll that is Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And we give our time and our attention and everything inside of us to it, sacrificing that, thinking it's going to give us something. That's why people would bow down to idols. If I just bow down and do the incense and all that, they're going to give me what I want. We're no different. But he says at the end of this, he says, those who make these idols will be like them. And so will all who trust in them. If your default setting goes to entertainment, we're going to become consumers rather than contributors. If our default setting goes to the news when we wake up every single morning, we're going to become fearful, anxious, divisive, combative. If our default setting is social media in your downtime moments of the day, you're going to get connected but deeply lonely. If your default setting is success and to just pour yourself into your work thinking that success is going to be that for you, you're going to be striving and unsatisfied, rarely content. Do you see that? Like if we give our time and our attention to these things, we will become like them. And Jesus says, in your weakness, in your vulnerability, turn to me. Turn to me. As Katie just so beautifully said it before, being a part of the band, it's given her an opportunity every single night to develop a 20-minute rhythm of being in the Word, pouring herself over worship, and it's starting to form and shape their whole family. That's expanding the soul. That's a beautiful thing. The Apostle Paul experienced this as well, and for a lot of us, like we just want to will and wish all of the pain and suffering away. That's just a big default setting inside of us. But this is what Paul did, right? In 2 Corinthians 12, 8 through 10, he says, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord, take it away from me. He had some sort of a thorn in the flesh. Commentators are split as to what that thorn in the flesh was. It might have been some sort of an eye issue. But Jesus looked at him and said, Paul, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in your weakness. He says, therefore, I'm going to boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses so that Christ's power may rest on me. Any one of you, like, I don't know about you, but I don't want to settle for what's in my own capacity for life. For me to please me or to help me or to kind of pull myself up on my own bootstraps, I got a ceiling. There's only so much I can do for me. Paul says, I want a power beyond me pouring into my life. I want a peace. I want a truth. I want a love and a joy to flood into my life that I can't do, but only God can. And in my weakness, when I turn to him in prayer and I lean to him to build that relationship, I know that God and his power is going to come in me in a unique way. And we develop that when we're weak. And we go to him. He says, that's why for Christ's sake, I delight in my weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecution, in difficulties, in being rejected and abandoned. He says, for when I'm weak, then I'm strong. Because God's going to be a part of that equation and start building something on the inside of me that's going to go way beyond my capacity, way beyond the capacity of your job to please you or the office to numb you. God's going to do something greater. I think for a lot of us, we're so tempted to just tune out when life gets hard. And can I tell you, God doesn't want to waste your pain. God doesn't want to waste your pain. In COVID, actually, when the whole country went bonkers, there was a real shift in people attending church that hasn't really come back too strong. The regular attendance of people coming to a church on a regular basis is still percentages down from where it was before. And I think because some people just all of a sudden had the excuse of like, well, if I don't want to do church, I'm just not going to do it. Can I tell you that there is a beautiful thing that happens when people gather together? The Spirit of God is actually present here in ways that he's not when we don't meet together. When you're feeling weak, this is one of the best places for us to be. And not just on Sunday mornings, but in our groups, building relationships with other believers. There's a beautiful thing that God says he'll do when people gather together. Isaiah 40, 29, 30 says, he gives strength to the weary. He increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary. Young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They get powered up. They're going to soar on wings like eagles. They're going to run and not grow weary. They're going to run and walk and not be faint. C.S. Lewis describes our transformation in our weakness when we turn to God in this way. He says he's going to make the feeblest and filthy of us into a dazzling, radiant, immortal creature, pulsating all through with such energy and joy and wisdom and love as we cannot imagine. A bright, stainless mirror which reflects back to God perfectly, though of course on a much smaller scale. His own boundless power and light and goodness. That's what he wants to do inside of us. The process will be long and in parts very painful, but that's what we're in for, nothing less. He said it's going to be long. He's turning the word here. Jesus says, you have endured, Church of Philadelphia. You've been faithful. You've persevered. Keep going. Don't give up. Don't give up. Can I tell you that there was a real temptation for a lot of people in our church in the early days where there was like nobody in the seats for them to just walk out and go away. I know that temptation because I was tempted to get up and walk away. Like, what are we doing this for? There's nobody here. I'll never forget the first vision night the second vision night that we had when we hadn't even launched on Sunday mornings yet. And we were inviting the people that we were building relationships with to come hear about this vision that God had put in our hearts and the values that and the culture that we believe God wanted us to create to help people know and experience God. Our first vision night, we had about 20 people, and we were so excited. We're like, man, this is going to be great. You know, maybe the next night we're going to have 30 or 40. 4 people showed up, one of which was an older lady who would not stop talking the whole time that I'm trying to talk. And the other one was like a mentally disturbed kid that had headphones on the whole time, and he's just doing this. And I'm thinking to myself, this is not why we planted the church. And I'm telling you, the minute I saw who we had in the room, I was tempted to throw the white flag and just be like, guys, you know what? Not going to work tonight. Why don't you all just go home and we'll just try this again another night. And I distinctly heard the voice of God speak into my soul in that moment and said, if you quit now, you're going to quit 1,000 times. You share the vision that I've put in your heart as if there's 1,000 people in the room. And believe that I'm going to be with you. Some sort of a key turned that night in my soul. And we put a stake in the ground and we said, God's called us to this. We're going to give this all we have. And I praise God that happened that night for me. Because we would not have had the privilege of being a part of the lives that have gotten changed here at the church otherwise. Some of you know that. You've been with us from the beginning. You stood in there. You've hung in there when things were tough. And even when some good friends just walked away. Jesus says, hold on. I'm going to hold you. And even though some people will reject you and walk away, I've got the keys to the kingdom of the house of David, meaning eternity and a perfect, beautiful home. He said, I got those keys, and what someone shuts for you in earth, I'm going to open for you in heaven. I got a wide open house that has your name written on one of the seats because you belong in my family. This is the most beautiful part of all this. He ends the letter this way in Revelation 3:11-13. He says, I'm coming soon. Hold on to what you have so that no one will take your crown. The one who's victorious, I'm going to make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will they leave it. I'll write on them the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God. And I will also write on them my new name. He says, whoever has ears, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Can I ask you, why do you write your name on anything? To signify that it belongs to you, right? That's why your kids in the kids zone, they got their names on their backs and you got the other side of the name tag because you're the only one who can pick up that kid. They belong to you. Your books, your car, whatever it is, you put your name on it because they belong to you. Jesus says, I've written my name on you. When you believe in me, when you're willing to be rejected and abandoned because of me, I got my name on you because you belong to me. I don't care what kind of rejection you face in this world. Hold tight and don't just sit quiet in the background. Give it everything you have in this world because I got a home forever for you. Don't you dare let the rejection of this world or the marginalization silence you. You were made for more. You were made for more. And this is the last thing that you can write down. The belonging, we have to find the true belonging and identity is in Christ and his permanent family. This is where we believe it. This is where we build it. And he says we're going to be pillars. In this unstable world where a lot of things are shifting and some people will crown you in one moment and dethrone you in the next, he says, I'm going to make you a pillar. And not just anywhere, but in the temple of God. So the beautiful thing about a temple pillar is not only is it stable and it's strong, it is ornate, it's gorgeous. And this is what God is making every single one of us into when we cling to him. And just as in anything that has a pillar, like no one pillar can hold up the roof, right? There's a whole lot of them. Jesus said there are thousands and thousands and thousands of pillars over the generations of people who have not rejected my name, but have held tight to me, and you're going to be one of them. If only you will come to me, cling to me, and let me become everything for you. That's what I'm making you into. Hold tight. I know it's hard. I know that your workplace has made you feel uncomfortable. I know that people would rather not have you say anything about your church or about Jesus Christ or your faith. I know that. I know your family members have shut you down because of what you believe in. Hold tight. Give it everything you have. Tell others about me because I'm that good and I'm making you into something glorious. For some of us, we've known a lot of rejection in this world. But God says there is an eternal family where one day you will never be rejected again. And not only will there be an endless positive feedback loop into your soul, but he's going to have his eyes on you as if you're the most precious thing in all the world. The radiance of his personality and his glory and his friendship, it's going to be all encompassing. And this is what we'll get to experience. Why? Because he was rejected. The Son of God, when he came into this world, he was rejected. He was abandoned for our sake. It says that he was despised and rejected by man, a man familiar with sorrows and sufferings. Why? Because when he went up on the cross, he had to suffer in our place to take all of our pain and all of our punishment, all of our rejection towards him on him so that we could be restored to the Father. That's what he did for us. And in that he says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep, and not only that, but I'm the gate. And when I open the gate, everyone who believes in me is going to get welcomed into my house and belong forever. That's who I am. My question for you today is, do you believe that? Do you want that? It's worth it. Let's pray. God, my heart for myself and my spiritual family today is that we would hold tight. And in the moments, God, where we can get rejected, and every one of us will be, if we truly follow you, in those moments, God, would we hold tight? Would we not bow the knee to those who want us to be silent? Would we not tune out when those have characterized us as weak and insufficient and unintelligent and of no value or importance? May we remember that the only audience that matters more than anything else is the audience of one. The one who made us. The one who put your image into us and said you have infinite value. You have infinite worth, and I proved it to you when I died in your place. Would we turn to you, God, in those moments of weakness? And remember once again, never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. We love you, God, and we thank you for your death, burial, and resurrection, and the family that we have with you. Keep us enduring, God. And would you continue to build your church and to build your pillars here so that we can reflect your glory. In Jesus' name we pray.
We hope you enjoyed today's experience. Don't just hear the message today, put it in action. What spiritual next step do you need to take? Go ahead and fill out that digital connection card and take that next step. Or you can just get information about how we can help you go closer to God. Right now we're going to worship through our giving, and you guys are so generous. Thank you. Your giving allows us to put into action God's transformative power by helping our friends and neighbors know Jesus, meeting real needs in our community, our city, and even all over the world. You can click the Give button right on our live stream page in the info section. You can give on our website at thewellnh.org/give, or by simply texting the $sign in the amount to 84321. You can give a one-time gift or a regular gift by automating your giving. And listen, let us know how we can serve you by texting us at 97,000. We would love to hear from you. So have a great week. We'll see you next Sunday, and don't plan to watch alone.